Rev up your engine!
SO5672 says, in terms of reliability, what is the lesser of two evils, a turbo or a hybrid? It depends on what kind of evil you're talking about. Turbos get a lot of power, they run off the exhaust gas, and if you drive slow, they get better gas mileage. Of course, nothing like a hybrid. And they can last a certain amount of time. Most turbos will last 140,000 miles or so if it's well built, but eventually they break. A hybrid, if you bought like a Toyota Prius, I've seen them go 150,000, have no problems at all. But then when they get old, they cost a fortune. The batteries can be $10,000. You got to replace the transmission, transfer case, generators inside. That can cost you $6,000, $7,000. Overall, in terms of money, it depends on how long you're driving and how you're planning on driving. If you're talking 10, 20, 30 years down the line, the turbo would probably be better than a hybrid car, because hybrid cars will cost a lot of money, even the Toyotas. Everything eventually breaks. Ed Sanchez says, what is the function of an EGR valve? Okay, it stands for exhaust gas recirculation. What happened was, when I was a young mechanic, they came out with catalytic converters to burn the hydrocarbons from cars so they don't pollute. When they first just put them on and nothing else, they ran so hot that they created oxides. To stop that, they needed to burn cooler. To make them burn cooler, they found out if you put an inert gas into the engine, it can't burn as hot because it has less oxygen. So the EGR valve, as strange as it sounds, would reroute exhaust gas that's already burnt, even though it's hot, into the engine so that there was less oxygen, so the engine would burn at a cooler temperature, it would pollute less. Kind of crazy, putting hot exhaust gas in the engine to make it pollute less. It does work because there's less oxygen and it's already burnt, right? You could use better things like pure nitrogen or something, right? But then you'd need a separate container. They were using something the car already had, so basically it's kind of a half-assed way to build cars, but you know, that's the world these days. But if you look at modern cars, a lot of them don't even have EGR valves anymore because they have variable valve timing and computer syncing that they don't need that to keep the catalytic converter from getting too hot, so really modern cars don't even have. EGR valves are basically a half-assed way to make cars pollute less that they don't use in many cars these days. Puff Neeson says, my 99 Buick Park Avenue Ultra won't start, then it shuts off right away. What do you think it is? If it won't start, but then it starts and stops right away, the first thing you want to check is for a vacuum leak. Try my video, finding engine vacuum leaks with a cigar. Because vacuum leaks suck too much air. When a car's cold and you start it up, it's starting to rain now. Hey, we're out in the wild now. It's cold and rainy. It's 38 and raining. You get too much air, not enough fuel, car won't start. But if it does finally start, it'll just die. So check for massive vacuum leak first. That's the obvious thing. I mean, there's a zillion things that can do it. A weak fuel pump, a braking ignition system, but often that's a large vacuum leak. So check for hoses that have fallen off under the hood. Could easily be a large vacuum leak. It's just me says, are the modern Subaru engines built better than they were 20 years ago? Generally, they are. But here's the problem. The four-cylinder engines, they seem to be building them better. I don't see the blown head gaskets I used to see. But the six-cylinder engines, no. They're often worse than they used to be made. I've seen them where they clatter, they make noise, they wear out with 60,000 miles on them. In that case, I'd say no. The four-cylinders, yes, but the six-cylinders, no. I still tell people, do not buy a six-cylinder Subaru. I'm not impressed by the technology. The fours, they seem a lot better than they used to, but not the sixes. Solaris Pagana says, is it okay to use lower octane fuel than what's recommended in a car? Yes, if you have a modern car. Modern cars, everything's computer controlled. They can compensate for high octane, low octane. You won't have the same horsepower. As I've said many times, as Ford's got that EcoBoost four-cylinder in a Mustang, and let's say it puts out 340 horsepower or whatever, with high octane, it'll tell you you lose about 45 horsepower if you use regular gas, but it'll run perfectly fine. But let's say you got a 67 Chevelle with a blown out engine with high compression pistons. No, you got to use high compression, high octane gas on those, or they'll ping and that'll do damage to the engine. But most modern cars aren't that way. You'll lose a little horsepower, but they'll run perfectly fine. Andrew Stevenson says, Scotty, I got an 06 Audi TT and getting a grinding noise to the front brakes and it only happens intermittently. It can go days at a time. The car still stops and brakes fine. Okay, well, what you want to do first is pull the tires off, check it. It could be they're getting thin, change the pads. Now, if they're still thick, I really wouldn't worry about it because a lot of times people put really strong brake pads on those that could be metallic, semi-metallic. There's a lot of metal pieces and they'll make noise as you brake. The only other thing that could be wrong is do check for play, because if your wheelbase bearings are starting to go out in the front. When you brake, that can make the wheel bearings grind some. So it could be the wheel bearings going out too. So you would want to pull on the wheels, and if they got play all around, the wheel bearings weren't. You'd have to spend a lot of money on an Audi replacing those. John Brody says, Scotty, what do you think of the plastic oil pans used by VW? Yeah, another brilliant, cheap Volkswagen design. Those things are low enough to the ground anyways, right? You hit a plastic pan and it cracks, there goes your engine. It's just a cheaper way to make cars, and that's going way too far. It doesn't cost that much money to make a metal oil pan. They're just going as cheap as they possibly can. And some of the Volkswagens, they're the worst designs on earth anyway. Some of them have two-piece. There's one oil pan on the bottom, there's another piece in the middle, and if they crack, you gotta pull the engine out and spend a fortune replacing all the parts. Volkswagen has some of the worst engineers in the world when it comes to building vehicles that are a pain in the butt to repair. And with a plastic oil pan and a car low down to the ground, isn't that a recipe for disaster if you really think about it? Cedric says, I got an 01 Passat 30 valve V6 165k on the dash for $1,000. What do you think? I think you're a gambler man, baby. You like playing with fire and playing with dynamite. But you only paid $1,000. Nowadays, some of these places are renting cars for $500 a day. So if you get 2 days worth out of it, you get your money's worth. Those V6 engines are one of the worst designs of all time. When something breaks, it costs a fortune to repair them. And it's got, what, 165,000 miles? But they're fast and fun to drive. Let's say you bought that as a weekend toy and you like playing with your own cars. It could be fun for a while, right? But if you bought it for an everyday driver, I do have to say, you're insane. You've lost your marbles. Mr. Yonifus says, Scotty, what do you think about buying a used F-150 5-liter 4x4 2011 with 100,000 miles? Or a 2009 to 10 5.4 4x4 with similar mileage? What should I look out for? Those are well-built trucks that can last a long time. Like any vehicle, you want to pay a mechanic like me to check the engine and transmission with the scan tool. Fords have an awful lot of data on it, those later model ones. I could sit there for days analyzing it all, but luckily my machines analyze things automatically, and some of them are color-coded, so I just got to watch the data. And if it's green, it's fine, but then if it's yellow or red, then I got to look into that section. They can be excellent vehicles. The main thing, if you're looking at 4x4s, is first put it by 4x4, drive it around at 4x4, and see if that works. That's the first thing that generally breaks on those, and if it's breaking, don't buy it, because it can get really expensive to fix. But they can last a long time. I've seen them with 200,000-300,000 miles on them. Don't overpay, but they're pretty good trucks, as long as they've been taken care of. That 2853 says, I got a 2015 Jeep Wrangler, makes a high-pitched whining noise in drive when it's warmed up. You're saying when it's warmed up. Unfortunately, it's probably your transmission starting to go out. Because if it's a bearing or anything like that, when the bearing is cold, they're generally going to make a lot of noise when they're cold. Like if it's something your fan belts drive, it whines a lot when it's cold and it stops when it warms up. But yours is whining once it warms up. On those, it's almost always the transmission going out, which is why I tell people not to buy them in the first place. They're relatively weak transmissions and they cost a fortune to repair. Now, if you really want to see what the noise is, watch my video, Finding the Source of Car Noises, Scotty. Type that in and watch it. The device will show you exactly where the noise is. And if that whine has come from the transmission, you might think about selling it while it's cold. Soulful53 says, AT205, Scotty, will high mileage synthetic seals be rejuvenated like AT205 does? From my experience, I've tried those high mileage oils on leaking seals. Didn't seem to do much of anything. I've had customers that they tried it and they said, look, it's still leaking, Scotty. I'd get one bottle of AT205 reseal, I'd pour it in the engine, all boom. The leak would stop within 200 miles. They're not that concentrated. And you know how it goes when they sell you oil with additives? They never tell you how much additives are in them. I had an argument with the Shell engineer one time. I said, you guys used to tell us how much cleaner you had, that nitrogen-based cleaner, but you don't anymore. Why? And they said, we don't want it added a fuel war, so we're not going to tell you. So who knows how much they put in. With AT205, you get the whole bottle and pour it in the engine. So you're getting a lot more seal. It's the only thing I ever found that actually works. Miss Yankee 1000 says, 2010 Nissan Altima, I got a PO 128. I was told it's a thermostat. What do you think? Well, change the thermostat. That's the only cheap fix you got. And generally, that's it. I mean, you could also have a problem with the sending unit, given the wrong temperature to the computer, a wiring problem between the sensor and the computer, a computer problem, a cooling fan that stays on the whole time and makes the engine run too cool. But change the thermostat. That's a cheap, easy fix you could do yourself. John Data said, I bought a 72 Beetle. The gas gauge only read 3/4 full. After filling it, where should I do? All you got to do is change your float and your fuel sending unit in the trunk. You know, it's an old Beetle. Open the trunk. There's a little bunch of screws. You take them off and get yourself a sending unit and a float and put it in. It's a 5-minute fix, simple fix. Those break all the time on Volkswagens. And it's not reading right because it's broken inside the gas tank. You can get those things aftermarket. It's no problem at all. They're readily available everywhere. So if you never want to miss another one of my new car repair videos, remember to ring that bell.